Welcome back to the live webinar here at BINA. So we are in the middle of discussing the topic of how integrated should Jews be within society. Are we supposed to become a part of society or remain separate from society? But first, a summary from what we learned on Monday. We discussed that the premise of everything, the foundation of everything, is Torah. The norms of society change, fads come and go, but our Torah is an eternal truth, is the guiding light of our life. This is the foundation, this is what we base ourselves on, and nothing else. The Torah, the Word of God, who is the creator of heaven and earth. Now we need to look at the Torah and see what does the Torah say about how integrated into society we should be. So we discussed that our sages tell us, Dina de Malchusa Dina. What the law of the land is, that is the law. We are commanded to keep the laws of the land. We are commanded, for example, to pay our taxes, to stop our cars by red lights, obey traffic laws, and in general obey all the laws of the land. Dina de Malchusa Dina. We discussed that things that are legally allowed to be resolved personally if you want to. For example, a personal dispute between two people, between two Jews. If one claims that the other one owes them money, the other one says it never happened. This should ideally be resolved in a Jewish court, in a Beth Din. However, if one party doesn't want to or doesn't want to listen to the Jewish court, then we are allowed to go and do that in a secular court. We discussed, of course, when we're talking about people which are dangerous, and the Jewish court in our times does not have an authority to lock these people away. We have to go directly to the appropriate authorities who can deal with that as soon as possible. We also discussed that when a law of the land, in theory, would contradict with a mitzvah, with a commandment of the Torah, we would be commanded to listen to the commandment of the Torah and disobey the law of the land. Thank God we live today in countries like Australia, where the law of the land ensures religious freedom and we are able to keep all the mitzvahs that we want to keep. However, there has been times throughout Jewish history where the law of the land has been in contradiction with the laws of the Torah, such as we are not allowed to keep Shabbos, we're not allowed to give a bris milah, etc., etc. We will be commanded to disobey the law of the land and obey the command of God, unless we will be endangering our life by doing so. Even that, there are exceptions, like we discussed. There are 3 commandments which we are commanded to keep, whether we have to forfeit our life, even if we have to forfeit our life by doing so. That is when it comes to laws. How about values? So we discussed that although there are many good values out there in the world, but there are many values which are in direct contradiction to our way of life and our value system. As Jews, we should not be looking towards the world to know what is good and what is bad, what is moral and what is immoral. We should use our value system, our eternal, holy, moral, just moral system to be our guiding light. That is the value system that we should hold ourselves to, and not necessarily whatever society says goes. That is what we discussed on Monday. Now let's get a little bit involved in culture, such as national holidays, or going to a sports game, dressing in the latest fashion. Is a Jew allowed to do all of those things? Now, what would be the issue with that? There's no clear prohibition against following the fashion. There seems to be no direct prohibition against celebrating national holidays. Obviously, we understand that religious national holidays that are connected to idol worship, etc., obviously that's forbidden. We're talking about neutral, national holidays, which have nothing to do with any other religions. Whatever country you live in, every country has national holidays. Would we be allowed to celebrate those holidays? What would be the issue with that? The issue is as follows. The issue would be, maybe, perhaps, it says in the Torah, we are commanded not to go in the ways of the goyim, in the ways of the non-Jews. This is generally known as chukos hagoyim, the ways, the law, literally the laws, but it means the ways of the culture of the non-Jewish world. Now, what exactly does that prohibition mean? It's a little bit complicated. It obviously doesn't mean to say, eat kosher, unlike the non-Jewish world which eats non-kosher, because I don't need a special, unique prohibition to tell me that. The Torah already tells us, keep kosher and don't eat non-kosher. So, chukas hagoyim obviously is not talking about that. It obviously cannot be talking about things which are obviously, in a clear way, connected to idol worship, because that would obviously be forbidden, because we are forbidden to serve idols. So what exactly is this prohibition of leiselchu b'chukas hagoy talking about? The Rambam, Maimonides, defines it as follows. He says, and I'm basically quoting, translating into English, we should not go in the ways of the non-Jews, not in their clothing, hairstyle, and things like that. End quote. He seems to be saying that in general, we shouldn't do anything similar to the way the general world does. So, for example, if they have a certain fashion, a certain type of clothing that they wear, we should wear a different type of clothing. If they have a certain type of hairstyle that they go by, we should be cutting our hair in a different style. In the Jewish Code of Law, Rabbi Yosef Karoi, who is the author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish Code of Law, the great Sephardi halachic authority, basically quotes this law from Maimonides word for word. However, the Ramah, the great Ashkenazi halachic authority, and Moshe Isserlich, who wrote footnotes on the Shulchan Aruch, he narrows it down a little bit and says, no, it doesn't mean to be different in everything. He says that what it means is that things that the non-Jewish world are doing, which are there for the sake of pritzus in Hebrew, which means immorality. For example, he says, at the times of the Talmud, the non-Jews would wear red, which was considered immodest. Such things we would be commanded to do differently and not to do it like them. Or another example, he says, things that the general world does for no reason. There doesn't seem to be a logical reason why they do it this way. And therefore, we should not do those things. Why? Because perhaps the reason for these things actually stems from idol worship, although we don't know that, but it could be, and therefore we should stay away from such things. However, things that society does, and there's a clear reason why they do it, we can assume that they're doing it for that reason, and therefore we would be allowed to do that. The example which he brings, which is very interesting, because he lived a couple of 100 years ago, and this example which he brings actually applies today as well. He says that it has become the custom for doctors to walk around with white coats. He says that is not something which makes sense. Either because it's a certain honor which is given to doctors that they walk around with a special white coat, or it's that if you would rush into hospital, this is obviously not his words, and you would want to find who's the doctor, it would be very clear to everybody who is a doctor and who is not, because the doctor is wearing a white coat. Such a thing, he says, would obviously not be forbidden for a Jew to do, because there's a reason for it, and the reason is a good reason, so why shouldn't we do the same thing? The Vilna Gaon, the Gra, who also wrote notes on the Jewish Code of Law, he says, he actually takes a step further and is much more strict. And he says, even things which have a reason, we should stay away from. We should be different in everything. He takes this to a very strict level. A very well-known example where the Vilna Gaon was very strict when it came to the concept of chukas hagoyim was that many people have a custom to put flowers and trees in a shul on the holiday of Shavuos, which is coming up in a number of weeks, to commemorate that Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, was covered with flowers and plants when the Torah was given on it. The Vilna Gaon, however, came out against this custom because he says that in the houses of prayer of other religions, they also do this. Now, although you can maybe explain this, maybe it's to decorate it, maybe it's to make it look nice, so why shouldn't we adopt that as well? But he came out against that and says, since they do it in the house of worship of other religions, we should not adopt that custom. Practically speaking, today, many shuls do have that custom, many shuls do not have that custom, and either way, there is who to rely on. Now let's move on to more contemporary halachic authorities and more contemporary issues. For example, sports games. Going to a sports game seems to be very something that the current culture is very into. Is that forbidden for a Jew to do? Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, a great halachic authority of our generation, he writes a responsa about this, about Chukos HaGoyim in general, and he mentions the idea of sports game. And although he greatly discourages it for other reasons, such as an atmosphere of immodesty and a waste of time that a person should be studying Torah, however, in terms of Chukos HaGoyim, a clear prohibition, he says, we cannot say that it's prohibited based on what we just said from the Ramah, because going to a sports game has nothing to do with idol worship. 99.9% of people, which are maybe 100% of people which are going there, it has nothing to do with religion. It's just a way of relaxing. It's a way to enjoy oneself, which is a good reason to do it. So he says you cannot say it is clear out, straight out forbidden for the reason of Chukos HaGoyim, because it has nothing to do with something distinctly non-Jewish. It has a clear reason why people do it, and therefore it would not be forbidden in terms of Chukos HaGoyim. Again, once again, he does greatly discourage it, but not for the reasons of Chukos HaGoyim. Then there's the issue with national holidays, and here we're not going to get to a clear conclusion because he himself actually battles with this concept. And he writes about the national holiday of Thanksgiving, which is a holiday celebrated in a number of countries, but especially in America, which is where he lived. Thanksgiving is a primarily actually a secular holiday, having very little to do with religion, so there's no real issue over there of idol worship. And he seems to say in various responses, there's a few responses where he discusses it, and he goes a bit of back and forth, and he seems to say that for a Jew, as a one-off thing, now also I forgot to mention, the custom in America that everybody strictly adheres to is to eat turkey on Thanksgiving. Would it be permitted for a Jew to eat turkey on Thanksgiving? So turkey is obviously kosher. Is there an issue to specifically eat it as a custom on Thanksgiving? So he says that the conclusion which he comes to is he seems to say that as a one-off thing, if a Jew wants to celebrate Thanksgiving and eat turkey, it's not an issue of Chukos HaGoyim because there's nothing really to do with religion. However, he says to establish it as a set holiday that a Jew should celebrate year after year can be an issue. And again, there's no real clear conclusion there, and we'll leave it at that. However, what is clear is the perspective here. The perspective is clear. That although, as we mentioned, we do have to follow the law of the land, however, in terms of culture, in terms of values, in terms of our way of life, we definitely need to remain different, we need to remain distinct, we need to remain special. And that is because we as Jews, as we have discussed many times, have a unique special mission, and that unique special mission is carried out through our special, unique way of life. And although, yes, as I mentioned, we do have to listen to the law of the land, we have to make sure that we do not become totally integrated within society in terms of our values and our culture, and we retain and we keep and we hold strong to our special, unique way of life, our special, unique values, which are moral, eternal, and just, and through that we will be able to fulfill our unique and special mission. Have a good day.